All right, these are some of my favorite episodes. This will be the fourth time that we've done a podcast episode together. The first was at the Waterbury.
Mm-hmm.
Second was Turks. Third was Outer Banks, and here we are.
Oh, yeah, I guess we did the 100th episode up at Waterbury now.
We
That's
did,
right. That's
we
right.
did,
That's right.
and we kind of had this planned a while ago that we were getting close to the 200th episode, and we were gonna jam together, and we started putting ideas together of having it in a different podcast, a more professional. I guess this is our basement studio. We were gonna put in, but we just wanted to get on here and jam and just have some fun. But welcome, my beautiful bride.
That's me.
That's her, Angie Kitko. Today is our 200th episode.
200.
200. That's a lot.
That's a lot of talking.
Every single week since August of 2023, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that
No, longer than that.
Longer than that. Holy cow.
2022, I believe.
Yeah, because there's 200 episodes, one a week, 50. That's 4 years. Holy crap. That's a lot of podcasting. And it is a lot of talking. And I don't have a lot of interviews because I only have interviews with people that I really, really want to sit across and talk with about their life. And my wife, I can't get enough talking about her life. So here we are again. Are you happy to be here?
I am.
Why?
Because it's nice to hear somebody else. I'm sure it's nice for everybody else to hear someone else's voice once in a while.
Today,
No, I know. I enjoy doing these with you. They're a lot of fun.
they are. And I've got on my desktop, and at some point we're going to rebrand this, and it's going to be the Inner Wealth Podcast with Mike Kitko and sometimes Angie. We're going to do that. I haven't rebranded that yet, but we will, because and then we'll make it.
Angie.
And sometimes Angie. We'll make it more about us instead of just me and jamming, because I have a lot of fun just collaborating with my bride, my spouse. To celebrate, I had a couple ideas about how we were going to celebrate our 200th episode, and it was going to be about talking about the every week me creating content and you sitting there listening to whatever, and I was like, that'd be boring. What we've never done before is I've never interviewed you solely to have you tell your story and help people understand who you are at a deeper level. Because your story is fascinating. And you are so freaking strong. You are so powerful. You are so brave. You're so committed. And I want to help everybody understand how that all came to be and where we came from. Okay?
I have no idea what he's doing, by the way. I got a brief.
All she needs to do is answer the questions. And I'm going to do the asking, which is weird. And she's going to do the answering. So I am
You're not going to answer for me?
Sometimes I will. So I probably will. But I think we'll start where I think the best part of the story, if we don't anchor the childhood circumstances, I think everything else will be lost. So tell us about childhood. Don't leave the really dark stuff out, right? And of course, and if you want to add all the light you want, but tell us the struggles that you faced in your childhood, where you came from, and kind of set the foundation.
I mean, I don't even know where to start. I mean, yeah, geez, that's a loaded question. Like, I could sit here and just talk for hours on that. So my parents divorced when I was 2. So I was born to my mom was 19, my dad was 21. Both don't know much about my mom. She died when I was really young, but I can get to that. It's going to get there anyway.
How old were you?
I was 6 when she passed away. She was 26. I was 6. So I don't even think I ever really lived with my mom and dad. They kind of gave me to my grandma right away, who lived right across the street. Half of our family lived on one block in Alexandria, Virginia.
Beautiful, cute little block.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't cute then. Like now it's cute because it's been all the, yeah. So yeah, they kind of gave me to my grandma, and I lived with her most of my childhood up until my dad. Oh man, I didn't know you were going to, this is so much.
This is the good stuff though.
Yeah. So I lived with my grandma, and when I was, I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, and saw my dad get stabbed at a drug deal gone bad at the People's Drugstore on Monroe Avenue. Remember hitchhiking places with him, and it was crazy. My dad was a heroin addict. He don't know what my mom was addicted to, but you don't have one heroin addict and then one sober person. So, you know, I always kind of created this vision of her being this perfect person in my head. And over the past few years, I've realized that's absolutely not true.
There's never one toxic person in a relationship. There's always two.
No, my mom was a bit of a hellfire from what I've been told by some family members. A lot of people, they don't want to talk about her just because her death was so tragic. But she was a hellfire, and she ran away from home when she was 16 years old and was with my dad off and on, going underage at clubs. Been told I was a lot like her.
I was when you said hellfire, I was getting ready to.
It's about all I've been told is you're just like Carol Ann.
Yeah.
So anyway, I lived with my grandma. My grandma was my best friend. I remember she would go to work every day. She was my granddad was always really sick. He passed away when I was 3. I remember waking up. I slept in bed with my grandma, and I remember waking up to her bawling her eyes out one morning because granddaddy had died. And so after her granddad died, she had to she went to work, and she was a housekeeper at one of the little motels in Old Town Alexandria. She'd get me on the bus to go to school every morning, and then she'd get on the bus and she'd go to work. And I remember getting on the bus to go get our government cheese and getting on the bus to go do all this stuff. And that was only for a few years. And my dad met someone else, and they were going to have this great life together. So my dad pulled up in his little blue van one day to my grandma's house and took me away. And
there's emotion.
Yeah, went to go live with him and my soon-to-be stepmom. I can't remember if they were married yet or not, but anyway. And yeah, my stepmom was just as addicted as my father was, and she came with a child already, my stepsister, and that's really where things got really, really bad, because they were both heroin addicts. They were both really bad heroin addicts, and that just went on to years and years of just severe abuse and
lots of
neglect. Neglect and being kicked out of houses and in and out of houses, and cars being repossessed, and watching drug deals go down, and just all kinds of it was just hell.
Going from house to house, never really having a home of your own.
Yeah, stealing food. God bless my stepsister, because there were times we had no food and she would go and like literally steal food for us.
You told me about stealing toilet paper.
Oh my
before.
God, yes. And I'd love to talk with her. One day maybe she'll open up and she'll let she and I talk about this, because we talked about a little bit in North Carolina, like how we'd love to kind of get some of this out. But yeah, we had no toilet paper, and so we went to in Manassas Park, Virginia. We walked into the little pizza shop and we stole toilet paper. We went an entire summer without electricity, running water,
borrowing hot dogs
from neighbors. And I mean, this spans years and years. This wasn't just, this was,
but it was but it was consistent, right? There's always lack and always neglect.
Yep. So I just dealt with years of abuse. My father, allowed his drug dealer friends to molest us kids, and just not knowing what's going on, walking in with them with needles in their arms, watching my dad overdose, I mean, just remember putting my dad overdosing, seizing on the floor, having to get him into cold water. I mean, just a lot. It was just a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So fast forward it to 15.
Oh, yep. So I don't want to talk about that because that's not my story to tell, that part. I found out some pretty disturbing secrets in the family, and again, that's not my story to tell, so I don't want to talk about it right now.
And I know the story, and it's devastating, and it's absolutely vile what happened, and what one person would serve another person up to. Yeah, and so I was 14 years old, and I had just my stepmother was extremely abusive. I mean, she hated me. She hated me because I represented my dad having previously loved another woman enough to have a child with her. So you were pretty. And I was pretty, and I was smart, and all the boys always liked me. And everything just came easy to me. Everything always came easy to me. Yeah. And she absolutely hated that. My grandma loved me so much, and she hated that. She just hated everything about me.
And so I finally got sick. I got sick of the shit, and I just knew that I always wanted better. I always knew that I wasn't. And my step aunt said that they always knew that I was different from when they met me when I was 4 or 5 years old, and they said they always knew I was going to get out, which is really cool to hear them say that. And my step aunt, I don't call her my step aunt, my aunt Di. She is a very successful caterer in Washington, D.C. And I remember we would go to her house and she had like all these luxury down comforters and lotions and smell, like everything always smelled pretty. And I was like, this is what I want. Yeah. And even from like a very, very young girl, when we would go and stay with her, like, this is what I want. This is who I am. So yeah, 14 years old, left home. I had an older boyfriend. He was
not me.
No, not him. He same age as you, so he was 6 years older than me. So kind of weird looking back now. I was 14, he was 20.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
But yeah, I mean, thank God for him, because I paged him one day, and he knew that the code I paged him meant to pick me up from the bus stop in the morning. And he picked me up, and I said, I'm never going back there. And he said, okay. And so I stayed with him from then on. His mom and I are still very, very close. We keep in touch. And yeah, thank God for them, because they took care of me for 6 years. But then this guy came along.
And I came along, yeah. And I had almost nothing, and he was rich.
Yeah. And so when I say things came easy to me, this is a really great example of that. So I left home 14, and I turned 15, and I had so my dad, when my mom died, she worked for the Department of Defense. She was a secretary. So when she passed away, I got her pension, I got Social Security benefits, and there was something else. So there was some finances involved that my dad and stepmom got every month from me being in there. Well, when I left home and the government found out, they're like, well, you don't get the money anymore. So my dad said, you come back home. And I said, no. And then I tried to get him to sign me into school. He wouldn't. He wouldn't. He told me that I had to come back home for him to get his money back. And I said, absolutely not. And because he wouldn't sign me into school. So I started working. I was working at a little cafe in Bethesda, Maryland called Sutton Place Gourmet. And this guy used to come in every single day, and he would order a cheese bread and an espresso. And one day he started asking me, he said, how come you're never in school? And something just told me to tell him my story. So I did. And the next day he came in, he had a letter, and he slid it across the counter, and I opened it up, and it was from his law offices of Miles and Stockbridge in Rockville, Maryland. And Mr. James J. Dema, Esquire, they offered to represent me for pro bono in an emancipation case against my dad. And so, yeah, took my dad to court when I was 15, 16 years old, got fully emancipated. Yeah.
Emancipated at 15, 16.
Yeah.
And we met, so keep going, tell the story when, we met in abnormal psychology class, and tell the story and give some detail to that too.
Yeah. So because I was an emancipated minor, officially an adult under ward of the state of Maryland. And I was able to take a college entrance exam to get into college. I didn't have to get my GED, and took it, got into Montgomery College, and took abnormal. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just going to college. I was just taking random classes, didn't have a major or anything. And yeah, one day I bumped into abnormal psychology class. I'm pretty sure I had platform shoes on.
And leopard print.
And leopard print, yeah. Probably just came from the club, to be honest. Yeah. I was a total club kid with a coke problem. That actually came before you. But yeah, I stomped into this classroom in my little platform shoes, and somebody stole my bag that day from the bookstore. I came out, chop, chop, chop into the room, and oh my God, somebody stole my books. And it was my English 101 book. And he said, you can borrow my book, Angela. I'm like, who?
Because you had a tag. You had your work tag. Mm. She was an intern at IBM, so she had her work tag, and I just called her what was on her tag. That's it.
Yeah, and sat down in front of him, and I remember turning around, and he had his little Chuck Taylors on. I said, who wears Chuck Taylors anymore? Yeah,
she didn't like me, and I didn't like her. It was pretty obvious that we weren't fit to be together for a long time.
We were neither of our type. You weren't my type. No.
You were obnoxious, and
I still am.
yeah, and I was quiet. I was a quiet guy in that class, and you were
Well, you
friggin'
were also
obnoxious.
elderly in that class.
Elderly. I was 27 years old.
Yeah, we were all 19, 20 years old in that class because it was a 100 level class. He had already had his bachelor's degree.
Yeah,
I was taking for funsies.
I was just burning some GI Bill. I took biology 101 and abnormal psychology 101 just to burn. I love science classes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just there for funsies, and it was obviously meant to be. But the story I love out of that class is when we turned in our papers at the end of the course. I think of papers or just an exam or something.
Yeah.
I went up to get mine, and I got an A on my paper, and she went up to get hers, and she said, "Yeah, I got a C." And that kind of slightly set the tone for a long part of our relationship.
I was a ninth grade dropout, and I was getting B's and C's in college. I was doing pretty damn good. I was proud of myself.
No, it was funny. Okay, now every day at the end of class, and when I was in the Marine Corps, what we would do is we would have our work day, and I worked in an electronics laboratory in the Marine Corps, and at the end of every day, we'd wrap up the day, we'd clean up the shop, and we'd empty all the trash, and then we'd all go to the club, and the E Club, right, the enlisted club. And at the end of every class in abnormal psychology, I would say, "Anybody want to go out and grab a beer?" And everybody would say no. And then there was this one day after the term ended when I got a phone call.
No, it wasn't the term hadn't ended because
that's right. Because Dorothy.
Well, no, and
that's right.
So
we were nearing the end of the class.
It was December 11th, 1999, and myself and my fiance, and we were heading out for a night at the club. And I said, we had walked out of our condo, and I stopped and I said, "Let me call this kid. He's been like wanting to go out all semester." This kid, elderly gentleman.
I wasn't that desperate.
But I was just like, he's been asking to go out all semester. And so I walked back in, picked up the phone off the wall, and dialed the number he gave me. And he was at work because he worked swing shift at the time. And I said, "Hey, we're going out to the Shark Club. You want to meet us?" He had no idea where it was, so had to meet us at the Exxon gas station on Connecticut Avenue. And went to the Shark Club, and he bought me my martini, my first martini.
Yeah, I was just literally being innocent in all of this. I had no intentions. I thanked her for, with a drink for inviting me. That was
well, and we had been doing we had been on projects all semester together. So back then it was acceptable to go and it was abnormal psychology. So it was acceptable then to go, and we had to have a field trip to the psychiatric ward. Yeah.
But there was no spark at that moment. At that time, there was no spark. There was no interest. There was no spark. There was no nothing. No. So it was just interesting how that worked. And and then when there's this whole story about a transfer and
well, I left my keys in your Jeep because we met at the Exxon. You didn't know how to get there, and so I jumped into the Jeep. I got you over to the club because it was in Bethesda, Maryland. It's just a wonky little town. Like there's just little side streets, and he doesn't know where he's going. Even with GPS, and this is back in '99 when there was no GPS. So yeah, we were leaving. There was an altercation in the. I was going to get my keys from his Jeep, and there was an altercation between me and my ex-fiance at that point. And
he said, "If you
walk away right now, don't you ever come back home?" And I said something clicked, and I said, "Cool." So I jumped in his Jeep, and I asked him to take me to my friend Dorothy's house. Dorothy wasn't home.
She came home and never left. And that is the true story.
True story, Mike and Angie.
When I said there was a whole transfer, I didn't know if we were going to get into that. That's why I said I still remember the story.
Yeah.
But the point is she came home and never left, and it was it was pretty toxic.
Oh,
it was pretty toxic from the beginning. I mean, we sat on a lot of we blacked out a lot. We did a lot of drinking, and we did a lot of partying, and we did a lot of we went to a lot of Ravens games, and the very first day was it a week after we started living together, because we never not lived together really. I took her to a Ravens game, and I was crazy drunk at the end of the game. We had a great time tailgating, but I was completely like obliterated, if that's a word. And I started buying Sambuca shots for the entire bar, and that's when she kind of took my card and called it the night.
Signed his name on his credit card receipt and everything. Then he lost my car. I had to pay a
couldn't remember
little city kid in Baltimore to find my car. I remember the name of the restaurant it was parked near, and that was it. So the kid found my car,
and then we drove home. Right. Or back to my parents probably. But the point being is it started pretty toxic. This whole thing started toxic. And then, you know, we moved out of that apartment because it was a little beat up apartment that was mine. But we moved into a house, bought a car first because her fiance wanted her car back. So I bought a car and gave her my old car. She said she was going to make payments on that car, but she never did. And I guess I just let that go and overlooked that. I think you made one payment and then never made another. No, you did. You made a payment.
I think we talked about that before.
You made a payment, then you never made another one. And then we bought a house, and then we got pregnant, and it all happened pretty quickly. And it was like, you know, it was just a whirlwind. But and it wasn't always fun. No, it definitely wasn't always fun because I don't know, there was no spark in class, and I don't know for me if there was really a spark. It just felt it was just a series of yeses, but there was no real connection. And I'm talking about soul connection. I mean, we were living together and we were doing life together, but there was no real deep, purposeful, meaningful bond.
But I don't know if either of us knew what a deep, purposeful, meaningful bond was.
No, I'm just looking back. I just remember when you used to say, we're soulmates. And I'm like, are you crazy? We freaking argue all the time and we fight and all we do is get blackout drunk. But
okay, I did not get blackout. No, that was you got blackout.
You did a couple times.
But
all right, so we're pregnant.
Yeah.
And we have a kid, and her name is Caitlin Mackenzie Kitko, and she is our older daughter, and she just graduated college like 2 weeks ago. So we have raised a whole ass adult human being. It's pretty awesome.
And she is the very first person on my side of the family to graduate college.
So super cool. So Katie's born in April of 2002. And we're sitting there at our house, in our townhouse. And I remember this day. And I remember we were in our bedroom and we were holding Katie. And I remember Angie saying, you know, it was like, I don't know if it was Easter. I think it might have been Easter. And we went up to...
It had to have been because she was born in April.
And we went up to Baltimore and spent Easter with my parents. And then we went down to Alexandria and spent Easter down with some of her family and her aunts. And we were at our townhouse in the bedroom, and Angie said these words. She said, Mike, wouldn't it be awesome if we just kind of like moved away and just focused on our little family and not had this chaos of driving all over and seeing all this family? And that was like a Saturday. And a couple days later, and you can't make this shit up, a couple days later, I go to work on Monday, and they pull us in a conference room, and they say, hey, we're shutting this field office down, because the home base for the company I worked for was in Beaverton, Oregon. And they pulled us in and said, we're shutting this field office down, and we're going to ask some of you to move to Beaverton. And there was 5 of us that they asked, and I was one of them. And it was almost like Angie just spoke that into existence. Why don't we move? And we got invited, and they paid all of our travel, and they put us up in a little condo, and they gave us spending money, and it's like we couldn't have had a better move, right? And we got what we wanted. And when we lived in Oregon for 10 years, we basically raised our girls there, and that's what they knew as home. Angie fell into a deeper depression.
Yeah.
In Oregon.
In Oregon. Yeah. It was bad. Not just a depression. I mean, we had Katie. We were out there by ourselves.
Yeah. We had nobody.
We had nobody. As much as I didn't want the hecticness of all the multiple family, holidays and crap, we got out there and I was totally alone.
Yeah.
Totally alone.
And I was working, and Angie didn't have a job right away. No, you did, but then you quit. Enterprise transferred you as well.
Yeah.
So they gave you a position in the accounting office, right? We're recruiting.
I was
Recruiting. So she went to work, but then she started having some health problems, and that's when she became a stay-at-home mom, and that's when things really started to slide down.
That was definitely not good for me. And then I think that when we lost, so we had Katie, and then when Katie was a year old, we got pregnant again, and we lost our boy when I was 6 months pregnant, and that was very, very, very difficult because when he passed away, I had to carry him for 2 weeks in the womb before they could get me in for surgery to remove him. And I think there was a mix. I was probably still dealing with postpartum with Katie, and then get pregnant and lose the baby in its tragic way, and then the absolute trauma of having to carry your dead child in you.
And that wasn't the end. So you carried him, and they did basically what is it called,
a DNC.
A DNC, but there's another word. Extraction.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah. And then they left some in there. So she went into labor again to extract, to eject some of the parts that they had left. So it's like I don't know if, like, I want to sum it up to this point. It was like one tragedy and one harm or hurtful event after another, and it was like it wasn't getting any easier. It just kept getting harder and harder, and it's like all the stress and tension and struggle and all this turmoil just kept building.
Well, then after that, they said they weren't even sure if I was going to be able to get pregnant again. And then at that point, I was desperate to give Katie a sibling. And then we got pregnant with Megan. But then Megan's pregnancy was
Megan. It was both of them. Both pregnancies were difficult. They weren't easy. And we're not trying to make everything bad news, but we didn't have an easy first frickin' 16 years together. And before that, you didn't have a very easy life. I don't think either of us did, but at least I didn't have the frickin' poverty and the addiction growing up in the addictive state, and the circumstances.
And it was definitely all of that trauma compounded is what pushed me into the addiction piece, because, at that point I was so mentally unstable and emotionally unwell, and not knowing how to deal with any of it, not even recognizing it as trauma, and just having, I came from a very Irish family. You just swept everything under the damn rug, or you drank it away, and not knowing how to process or have anybody to process it with, or even us just having healthy discussions like we do now.
Sure.
And I think
we had none of them. It was all about sports or drinking or just superficial shit. Nothing really deep and meaningful.
And it's all compounded. So doctors kept prescribing me more and more medications and drugs, and I was in and out of the hospital, in and out of psych wards, in and out of rehabs. It was just, it was a lot.
I had to call 911 a lot to have her removed from the house, taken to a psych ward, and our girls grew up in psych wards. We just had a conversation probably a month or two ago where Katie said, I remember always going to the hospital, but I didn't know they were psych wards. But our kids grew up going to visitation at the psych wards and rehab and just everything else. And at some point, Angie was taking 400 to 500 pills a month. It was like crazy. But that's just Oregon. Then we moved, once again, I remember Angie saying, hey, I don't want to live here for the rest of my life. And if we are going to move, we got to move before the girls are in middle school. And they were like just a few months, not long. It was like 6 months before Katie was going to be graduating and going into middle school. And when Angie speaks something into existence, it tends to happen, because my phone started lighting up with recruiters, and we interviewed in San Diego, and I went to Connecticut, Illinois, and Chicago, and St. Louis, and we had a couple other options down in other ones in California, and different recruiters calling. Because I was an executive leader in corporate America, and I had done some really good work at Stanley Black & Decker, the company I was with. So I was being recruited by other companies that kind of knew what was going on and what was happening. And we had our pick, and we chose St. Louis, Missouri, right outside of St. Louis, Missouri. And that's where we live today. So we've been here for 13 years. But when we got here, it kind of got worse. When we got here, if it wasn't bad enough in Oregon, when we got here, it got worse before it got better. But Angie fell deeper into depression, and I was going to work, and we're still drinking. I remember on Fridays when I was pulling away from the plant, and you would send me pictures of the 212 packs that you had just bought, and you were home probably cleaning. You usually cleaned on Fridays, and you had your music up, and we were going to go drinking a lot after that. But the point being is, she fell deeper into a depression, and things just slid downwards even more until there was a lot of volatility in our marriage. Let's just say that. We're not going to go into deep detail. There was some infidelity both ways, and I got fired from my first position, that the energy company that brought us out to Oregon, or to Missouri, and then and I was with those guys for about 18 to 20 months. And then we had 5 months worth of severance. They treated us really well, and they gave us 5 months worth of severance, and we drank it all. We used to pick our girls up drunk from the bus stop at 2:30, and it didn't get any better. And then that severance was going to run out in January of 2015, and in December of 2014, I got a job offer. So we went into Christmas knowing that I was going to have a job after the holidays. So we drank a lot because woo! And then I had that job for 15 months because she wasn't in any better shape. I wasn't in any better shape. Our marriage wasn't in any better shape. Nothing had been cleared. Nothing had been cleansed. Nothing had been healed. We were just
we were making money though, so
we were making money. So that's all we really cared about.
I never had a stable place to live. I one time switched schools. I don't even remember how many times in 1 year. It was like 9 to 10 times because we moved so much. So it's like, oh, my girls have a stable home. They have a stable school. We've got money. They're not, yeah. So you think you're doing better. And
yep. Angie thought when we hit six figures, in my new book, she wrote the foreword, the first foreword, and she said we had a traditional marriage. In that I would complain for what he would go to work, and I was the nagging wife at home complaining for more. Right. Yeah. And it's exactly what it was. It was like more, but we hit the $100,000 mark, and Angie thought, and I was in my 30s, and Angie thought that was going to solve all of our problems when we hit that $100,000.
I mean, we used to go and have to use our food stamps to go and buy a 5-cent piece of candy.
Not us.
No,
not
my
us.
dad, my stepmom. So like 95 cents was a big deal back then, and you know, grow as a child in that serious, that poverty-stricken time. And so, making $100K a year, I'm like, damn, we've made it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was going to fix everything.
But nothing. And again, that was back in Oregon. We didn't touch it. And then things, when I hit the $100,000 mark, nothing got better. And she sank deeper into addiction. But anyway, then we were here. I got fired for the second time, and that's when everything changed. So, the first time I got fired, it was like, okay, I used to have a boss. His name was Marty Schnurr, and Marty was awesome. And he was the president of our division in Stanley. And Marty, I remember him joking. He said, if you haven't been fired once as an executive, you're not a professional. So the first time I got fired, I'm like, whoa, I'm executive, right? But the second time I was like, all right, something's got to change. And I started going on this journey. I hired a coach, and Angie was like, and that was actually a school friend of mine, guy that I went to grad school with. And he was doing some coaching. He was kind of new in the coaching space. And I started paying him. And she's like, what? You're paying your friend? You're paying him to be your friend?
Go to a therapist.
Yeah. But I stuck to my guns for the first time in my life. I stuck to my guns, and I continued the coaching program, and I continued doing the work, and I started working out, and I started losing weight, and I started reading, and I started meditating, and I started journaling, and I started, I've got books all over this house, but I started leaving all these cool things that I was learning. I started leaving them like on sticky notes at the kitchen table saying, Angie, here, like, read this, dog-earing pages, and just writing things, and just getting her to try to lean in a little bit. And she wanted nothing to do with it. And I was trying to bring her along, and I'm trying to get her to learn what I was learning and to feel what I was feeling, because I was finally starting to feel really good, and in my body and kind of in my mind, understanding what was happening in my mind and my body. I started feeling really good. And I wanted her to experience that too. And she didn't want that at that point. And I don't know, maybe that's wrong. You often say it's not that you didn't want it, you didn't think it was available to you, or that you were worth it.
Yeah, it was just again, and I didn't know this at the time. We talked about this on episode 102. Is like I just didn't know. I didn't feel worthy of being the person capable of making those changes. So it was a self-worth issue. Like, I think it was, I think recognizing all the horrible things and the horrible person that I was for so long, like there was just didn't think it was available to me. Didn't think I was worth it.
Not anymore. You're not a horrible person anymore. And 3 months in,
pretty awesome.
and we did the best we could. We weren't even horrible. We were just doing the best we could. And a couple months into this journey, when she wasn't really opting in fact, as I started clearing out some of this stuff and feeling better about myself and feeling better in my life, and I started committing to a coaching business instead of going back to get a job. And I was interviewing, but I went on like 5 interviews and I came up runner up in all of them. And after a while, I was like, okay, well, I guess that like whole job thing is closed. And I decided to, start a coaching business because, to be honest, when I was in corporate, the only thing I ever loved was developing people and developing teams. I didn't love the whole corporate thing and I didn't love the job thing, but I did love having somebody to develop and to coach and to teach. And I loved that. And I loved developing my organization. I loved developing my functional leaders. And when when I hired my coach, my first coach, and I'm sitting there on the phone with him, and there was an epiphany once. I'm sitting there listening to him. I'm like, he's doing exactly like my dream job. And if he could do this, why can't I do that? And that's kind of like when that whole thing started to happen and unfold. And that's when I kind of committed. I told Angie, I said, I'm going to start a coaching business. And she said,
no, you need to go get a job. You work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We get 4 weeks vacation, 401k, insurance.
Yeah, we need benefits. We need benefits. We need a job. And I committed and I was in, but I filed for divorce. It still wasn't good between us. And there were lots of attacks and it's just that old life had expired, but we were still living in remnants of that old life. But I knew that chapter was done, and I filed for divorce, not knowing that we were going to put everything back together. But I just made a post yesterday. I said, when one person starts doing the inner work and the other person doesn't, one of the unintended sad consequences is growing apart. And when one person's doing the clearing work and spiritual work, the inner, the mental, the emotional, the healing work, and one person's not, it's just a matter of time before you're not gonna be together anymore. And that's what I felt. I was like, okay, this is done. I'm moving on. And I filed for divorce. And Angie was high when I told her that, really high when I told her pharmaceutical addiction, so not like street drugs. But when I told her I was high, she laughed at me and belittled me. And the next day she was crying, and we had long conversations, and I still wasn't committed to rebuilding the marriage, but I put a pause on the divorce. And I said, let's test your commitment. Let's see if you're really committed to this. And from there, we went to NA that night, and there's been a couple relapses. There were a couple relapses up to this is 2016, and we're talking about 2017, 2018.
2017, the book signing.
The book. So 2019.
Was it
20, I'm pretty
I
sure.
think it was before 19.
It was 18, 19.
Yeah.
So anyway, there were a couple relapses, and when that last relapse happened, it's like, that was it.
Yep.
That was the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we just keep stacking wins, and we just keep. It's not all like butterflies and unicorns and rainbows. I'm not easy to live with.
No, you're not.
I'm not.
And I'm not either, though.
You're easier to live with than you think. You make my life easy.
Okay.
The point being is, it's not all butterflies and rainbows. We do have challenges. We do have obstacles. Our business goes up. Our business goes down. There's still financial insecurity that creeps in every once in a while. But what's not present is a lack of commitment to each other, a lack of dedication to each other. We don't threaten divorce.
No.
We don't talk about ending our marriage.
It's no longer us against it's no longer Angie versus Mike or Mike versus Angie. It's Mike and Angie versus
us against the problem,
the challenge.
Yeah.
And someone, you talked about that when the unintended consequence of one person growing. Someone on that post had said, or you just create space for the other person, but that space is very limited. And that's what I think. And that's what you created that space for me, but there's no way that we would be sitting here 7 years later just with you still holding that space, because that's just not possible.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I know the comment. I think the assumption there is that there's no attacking, and you're both living your lives, because you were attacking and you just kept attacking. As I kept growing, you kept attacking more, and I think it was insecurity, right? It was just insecurity. Hey, even our girls tried to get me to stop growing and stop doing the spiritual work that I was doing, because they didn't know who I was becoming. They were unfamiliar with who I was becoming. Suddenly I started feeling like Zen, and I started doing like monk shit, and our operations assistant Kara Dossi is like named me Monk Mike, because I sit in long periods of solitude and silence and with my eyes closed and just feeling like good. But that wasn't the old Mike. But
when you're used to a life of chaos, and peace feels like boredom.
When you're addicted to chaos, you said it.
Yeah.
But when you're addicted to chaos, peace feels like boredom. So you tend to create some chaos in your life. But here's the cool part, and this is where I was thinking we were going to go before we started this. Angie has gone from pound.
Nobody knows what pound is.
I'm getting ready to explain. Was that the first? No. That wasn't the first one. No, the first Angie explored MLMs and started working in network marketing, and did that for a little bit and decided that wasn't for her. Then there's Pound Class. And imagine a fitness program where you have 2 drumsticks and there's loud music and you tap and you move and there's a little bit of dancing and stuff involved. And she took some Pound classes to learn how to lead that. And she did a great job for a while, and she had a lot of fun with it until she didn't.
Well, COVID hit. And
COVID
hit. And then, there was no place to teach. And we tried doing a virtual. And
now, one day she said, you know what, I'm going to go get my real estate license. And she got a partner in real estate, our good friend Katie Chatfield, who used to be our operations manager in Inner Wealth Global. They started a real estate investing company. They walk houses relentlessly. They've made tons of offers, haven't closed their first deal yet, have come very, very close to closing the first deal. They will, but they are pros. They've become pros at walking houses. They're doing the work. I've worked with many people who said that they wanted to start a real estate investing business and they didn't take any action whatsoever. It was all talk, no action. But these ladies have freaking gone crazy with submitting offers, walking properties, education. Angie decided that she wanted to get a real estate agency license, and she actually did that. She has her license. She's a licensed real estate agent now. She just held her first open house this last Sunday. She crushed it.
We did another one this Saturday.
She's networking with real estate investors. She's networking with real estate agent at her brokerage. She's showing up more in the real estate space. Her life, and I'm trying to be respectful about this and not demeaning. If you would have looked at her life just a couple of years ago, it was really Mike Kitko and his wife, Angie, because it's like when she walked into a room, she was Mike's wife. And I never wanted that, but that's what existed. And now she goes places and she's Angie Kitko, and they know her. And she's her own brand, and she's living in her own power, and she's becoming known for who she is and what she does, what she brings to the table, not just as a +1 for me. And that feels really, really good for me.
Yeah, it also feels good being Mike's wife. I've always enjoyed being, that's Mike's wife.
And I love when we go to real estate meetups and I'm Angie's husband.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I'm there supporting you instead of you supporting me. And I think that feels really, really good, is finally being able to show up to support you in something that you're doing instead of vice versa. It feels really good. It is so freaking fulfilling. I'm so blessed to have you just in my life and as my wife and as my support, my greatest cheerleader. And fuck, it's finally good to be a cheerleader for you for once. Damn it. Whew. So the whole point of this episode was to celebrate our 200th episode.
Yes. And congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a huge accomplishment, honey.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's a lot of topics.
That
He'll say to me, "What should I do my podcast on?" I don't know. If I had that type of creativity, I'd have my own damn podcast. So.
Yeah. Yeah, you just say the same thing over and over a lot. So you know how a little bit ago you said, "Oh, we covered that on the 100th podcast episode." But when you record a podcast, you assume that not everybody's listened to every episode, and you unpack the stories, right? Yeah. But a lot of the same things, but in a lot of cases, they're the same things said differently, right? So that you see them and you understand them from different angles, and we just keep. I have a bit of wisdom. And I keep deepening my understanding of the wisdom, and I keep sharing the deepening of that understanding of the wisdom, and it keeps like growing in my life and people's lives. But the purpose, the secondary purpose, was to celebrate 200 episodes. Mm-hmm. When we jumped on here, it's to help you understand Angie and her story, that no matter how much suffering you experienced as a child, no matter how much suffering that got amplified in the second and third decade of your life, the fourth and fifth decade can be decades of rebirth and reinvention.
It's never too late.
And reconciliation. Let's say that. I'm looking for more rewords. But can reinvent ourselves anytime we want and heal. But it takes getting into a place where we develop a healthier sense of self-awareness, start to reshape our self-concept, because our self-concept is our only limitation.
And it also means coming to terms with you're not a victim.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the biggest things. Was I was stuck in such a heavy victim mentality because all these things that just kept happening to me.
And we were both looking for a way to be a victim.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite books, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, he said, all arguing is two people fighting to see who's the bigger victim. Oh, me too. Me too. I'll say it again. All an argument is two people fighting to see who's the bigger victim. And when you frame it like that, it's holy shit, I never want to argue ever again because I don't want to be a little bitch. Yeah. Right. So I hope you guys had fun hearing Angie's story. You have anything else you want to share?
No, just again, congratulations on your 200. I think I'm very, very proud of you.
Thank you so much.
Very proud to be your wife.
There's going to be another 200 episodes, and then we'll do this more. And at some point, we're going to rebrand it to the Inner Wealth Podcast with Mike Kitko, and sometimes Angie.
Every time you say it, I feel like the cartoon pop up.
I think that's fun. But look, over the coming months, we got some really cool stuff happening. All right. For a year, I've been writing a book, and I've written a bunch of books that are still on my laptop and never got published. But we are on August 19th. We're publishing a new book, and it's called Inner World, Outer World. And it's my soul project. When I released my first book, The Imposter in Charge, that book, it was good, but it wasn't the one that I wanted to write. Right. I wrote that as more of a marketing book instead of an expression of my soul. But this is an expression of my soul. And Angie wrote the first foreword. And a lot of people that have read this book said that's actually the best part of the book. So even if you only get to the first foreword, it's well worth it. But we got that coming up. We've got the Choose Your Destiny workshop. The next Choose Your Destiny, a live workshop, live intensive, is August 22nd and 23rd. So we launched the book on August 19th. The 23rd was 22nd, 23rd. We had the workshop. So it's going to parlay nicely. We got a retreat with our mastermind in September
In Park City, Utah.
in Park City, Utah. So
I am super excited.
those are always awesome. We got an 8-bedroom house lodged in the mountains. It's going to be amazing.
And as a current connoisseur of the secret lives of Mormon wives, I'm really excited to go to Utah.
Here's something that is still in the formative stages that I'm really excited about. Is Angie and I are collaborating on something called Unbreakable. And what we're looking to do is take couples on a retreat, maybe a 3-day retreat, get somewhere in seclusion, in isolation, where it's just us, and we help these couples take a great marriage and make it even greater.
Yeah.
We're not looking to be
people who are in crisis.
We're not looking to be therapists, but we're just looking for people that have really, really solid relationships that they want to make unbreakable, right? And it is going to be a higher end offering. It is going to be a premier retreat. So we're gonna look to make this one big and really juicy, and I'm excited for that. And that helps. That is kind of what inspired me to say, hey, let's start talking about the whole story, not just bits and pieces of it on the last 3 episodes. Cool. So we're going to end here. Thanks for continuing every single week to show up and listen to this podcast and watch the podcast and hear the same things over and over again, and to hear the same intro and the same outro, because I love consistency. But thanks for your followership. Thanks for your viewership. Thanks for your love, your devotion to us. Thanks for your support. Thanks for everything, because without you guys, we wouldn't have made it to 200 episodes, right? But you guys make it easier to make great content and to put it out in the world. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything that you've supported us through and all the love that you've given us. And this is the end of the 200th episode. And now we've got 200 more to make.
Let's go.
Guys, until next week, love you all.